So originally I wasn't gonna make this video, but here I am. I'm making a video on Halloween. I originally wasn't gonna make a Halloween video for the sole reason of what this video is talking about. However, I figured, put something out, it's interesting. And so I just want to give my thoughts about horror in Geometry Dash and the untapped potential that it has. My thesis statement for this video is that horror levels are not scary in GD yet. I feel like come 2.2, levels will start being a lot scarier, but as of right now, unfortunately, I don't think any of the attempts of horror that have been done in GD have really gone well. GD levels in horror can fall into different categories. There are the try-hard levels that basically try to be horror games. There are levels that are just kind of gore fests in which they're not even really horror, they're just gore. They're gross, they're not fun to look at because they're gore. This is where levels like Man Man and Red Rooms would fall into. These levels aren't scary, they're just really, really graphic. Then you get the creepypasta levels, or as everyone calls them, the lost levels, which, yeah, if you think about it, lost video game creepypasta stuff, that's what this is. This is stuff like Lost Locked and Track 616 and stuff like that. These are half-hearted attempts at making horror levels. However, like creepypastas, most of these levels are made by children, and so they're really, really edgy and really, really try-hard. For the most part, everything I just mentioned is really easy to digest why I wouldn't find it scary. I mean, I don't think someone's looking... Maybe some people are when they were kids, and this was back in like 2.0 or early 2.1, but anyone who's older playing this game, I don't think they're going to be looking at Lost Locked and thinking this shit is scary. Especially when you have really, really edgy stuff like the existence of the song Skull.ogg, which is basically just ripped from a creepypasta. It's because of that whenever I see a level that is scary or close to it, it genuinely blows me away. There are a small select few levels that have managed to push the boundaries and be kind of unnerving. Now, I'll be totally frank, none of these levels I actually find scary myself. However, unlike most of the other cases, these are levels where I can see why someone would be scared of them. So I can't really talk about these or rank these in an order of least scary to scary, just considering I don't really find any of these levels scary. However, there are a couple levels that get closer to the criteria than others, and I'll save those for last. But if we're going to start anywhere in critiquing horror levels, I think we gotta start with Too Kid Friendly. Too Kid Friendly is an example of something I really dislike in this game, which is when horror levels aren't horror levels, they're just graphic and gory. And unfortunately for the sake of this video, and this goes for a lot of horror levels I'm going to be talking about here, but a lot of these levels I can't show for reasons we'll get into in a second. However, that really graphic thing aside, I really just don't find these levels scary because all they do is they shove blood and gore into your face and expect that to be enough. In Too Kid Friendly's case, what it essentially does is it establishes a really cute and innocent look at the beginning. With the monsters, you probably recognize them as they look very similar to the ones in Monster Mischief, which is a gauntlet level. These monsters slowly get dismembered as the level goes on, and it breaks down, and it gets scarier and scarier, until you start getting into really graphic stuff like intestines being ripped out, and self-exit game stuff, which is the reason I can't show this level, because that would get me horribly demonetized. This level's problems become very, very evident if you just kind of watch footage of the level. It's not really that... like, I don't think I have to be a professional critic to tear this apart. All I need to tell you is what the song choice for this level is. So with what I described, you know, this level with extreme blood and gore and sewer slide and all this stuff in it, right? What do you think the song is? Would you expect it to be 10,000 by Coal Breaks? It's just got all this really graphic imagery, and the whole time the music is like really upbeat and happy, and it doesn't fit the level at all. And while some people might actually find that scary, I don't. I don't think it fits at all. Because, like, this level has a similar progression to another level we're going to talk about in a bit, but that level works way better because it actually has a scary song. And, again, we'll get to that when we get to it. But this, it just doesn't work. And on top of that, it's just not even really that graphic for being graphic. Like I said, I can't show it because of the exit game imagery, but I mean, like, you can watch this and it's not that bad. It's, like, the most cartoony, absurd shit you could imagine. From the little I can show, I'm going to show a tiny bit of just the non-graphic parts, specifically because I'm going to use them to explain that, yeah, the decoration in this level really isn't that good. And while I know the focus is on the horror aspect and not the decoration aspect, the level being this low effort in terms of its deco really does cause the level to take a hit. Like, there's a part later in the level where you end up in the sky, and it literally just looks like a shitty version of Falling Up by Kermal. At the end of the day, though, what's especially painful about not finding this level scary is that you want to. You really do, because you can tell the creator of this level put in a ton of effort into making this, and it's a form of art you don't see that often in GD. Horror levels are very unexplored. There's another level that does what 2Kid Friendly is trying to do a lot better, and that is probably Mr. Crazy Hands. Very similar idea, it's not scary at all, it's just focused on, like, slasher, gory imagery. However, unlike 2Kid Friendly, A, this level doesn't take it too far and doesn't have a lot of, exit game imagery, but B, the level's not trying to be scary, it's more so just trying to be graphic and in your face. And because it's not trying to be scary, it actually works way more effectively. This level is graphic enough, but not too graphic, to where it keeps you on your toes, but doesn't go too far. This works really well as a GD horror level, because it's not trying to be anything more than what it is. It just works in its little box, and it's a very entertaining level. And on top of that, while the song is overused, and it obviously doesn't help the horror that much, Scream Room is a much more appropriate song for a horror level than 10,000 by Coldbreaks. Because Scream Room is actually an unnerving and edgy song. Basically, Scream Room works because it's not trying too hard, and that's why I like it. However, despite me liking Scream Room more, the point still stands that the level isn't scary, so it doesn't really pull off the horror thing too well. Moving up the totem pole, I think the two biggest attempts at horror in this community have probably always been Peaceful and Collab Level. We'll break them down individually, starting with Peaceful. Unlike the previous levels, Peaceful sets itself up very, very well. Ironically, and this is the level I was talking about earlier, Peaceful is basically 2Kid Friendly if it was well made. Peaceful works really, really well because the song choice is disturbing, the level actually does successfully set up a very false sense of security, and assuming you're lucky enough to experience this level blind and not, you don't know it's a horror level going into it, it can actually catch you off guard and be really effective at being a piece of horror. The problem with Peaceful is that when you break it down, it, again, isn't really that scary, it's just graphic and gory. The only time I've ever heard people say this level is truly scary are people who suffer from trypophobia, because, yeah, this level has a lot of imagery of tiny holes, and I think it's supposed to resemble, like, one of those spider caves. In terms of the trypophobia stuff, though, I feel even if I had trypophobia, this level's effect would be pretty weak on me because of some of the media I've consumed. Even non-horror media, like if you play a game like Borderlands, it has imagery like this all over the place, and that's not even meant to be outright horror. I can understand how this would be scary, but even then, I feel like this isn't good enough. And then we move into the final boss of horror levels. This is the level everyone will tell you is the scariest level in this community, and that's Collab Level. So we're going to break it down like this. We're going to talk about the original version of Collab Level, and then we're going to talk about the update. But first, a quick disclaimer. I am unable to showcase Collab Level because for whatever reason, every time I record a showcase of these levels, the final footage, the song is always too slow. And what I mean by that is, like, the end of the song will start at 80% into the level. I don't know why this happens, but I'm just unable to showcase Collab Level. So before we even continue, I do want to say that I'm not going to be too in-depth with Collab Level in this video, as I've already reviewed it in-depth. My first video was a little more rudimentary, and it was before I got my footing in the door, as I was pre-1000 subs, and I didn't have editing software figured out, so the footage is all blurry. But either way, these videos will do a much better job conveying my thoughts than this one will, as this is just a quick run-through of what I consider to be the state of horror in GD. So if you want a more in-depth review of Collab Level, those two videos exist. So the original Collab Level, I'm gonna be honest, I still think is pretty garbage. I don't want to be too mean, as I've actually had conversations with Mindcap behind the scenes about the level, and I know more about its creation process. All you need to know is that this level was made in, like, less than a month. So it's very impressive that Mindcap was able to produce what he did in this small allotted amount of time. but I'm still going to judge it compared to every other horror level, as a lot of people tout this as being the best horror level in the game, and yeah, I disagree. The problem I have with OG Collab level is that it is way too reliant on jump scares. What I mean by this is the level never actually sets up a proper atmosphere and never properly sets up an environment in which the player is scared. Rather, it pops up a spooky image and plays a really, really loud noise. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't the case for every single scare in the level. The first one specifically, with the eyeball scene, is really well done and constantly keeps you on edge. And while some people would disagree with me, and especially Mindcap, because I'm actually kind of sure that the community would have been a little too pissed at him for this, I am a little disappointed that the level didn't go all out and show the eyeball getting injured, because it cutting away really does kill a lot of it for me. Either way, it's still a good scare, and I'm not going to downplay that this is probably the most effective scare in the level. Unfortunately for me, even though it's effective in the wrong way because it's way too reliant on being, well, a jump scare. A lot of people, including myself, when they first saw Collab level, had the volume cranked up all the way, and then loud buzzing, which I later found out is literally just sampling microwave ear rape. Yeah, so you end up getting hit with microwave ear rape, and then scary, spooky imagery appears. And it's like, I don't think this is effective. I think good horror is horror that makes you scared of your environment, not something that makes you jump because you were surprised that something appeared in front of you really quickly. You also get the hanging bodies part, which I can't show. Yeah, so this is actually something I want to discuss about the broader GD horror sphere, and I really, really, really dislike this trend. This is something Collab level does, and it's something a lot of other levels do. I'll get to that, though, in a bit, because I really do have a broader explanation about why this bothers me so much, so we'll move on from it for now, but I really, really hate this trend. So, Collab level in and of itself, not that good. However, Collab level's update is much better, and I feel like is way better at setting itself up to actually, like, long-term scare the viewer, which is what I want to see in horror. Collab level's update does a really, really good job at making you scared of your environment, which is what I think good horror is. Collab level's update constantly hypes you up into thinking there's about to be a jump scare when there isn't. And that anticipation that gets falsely turned away is really, really euphoric and a really good feeling. I think the Collab level update, just from this alone, is the closest we've gotten to effective horror in GD. But even then, it only works on a first viewing, and even then, it only works if you've seen the original version of Collab level first. Which is bad, because the original version of Collab level is bad. Which means the update relies on you seeing the level blind when you have already seen the bad version of the level. On top of that, there's a flaw with Collab level I've yet to mention, and that flaw is what I can only describe as the church scene. In my original review, I jokingly called it Undertale Judgment Hall, but that was just a joke. It's obviously just supposed to be a random falling apart church hall. It's just this long scene where nothing happens, and it is irrationally long. I get it, it's supposed to set up anticipation, but it doesn't ever lead to anything. It's just anticlimactic, if I'm gonna be honest. And unfortunately, Collab level's update also has this part, which is really disappointing to me. I do think Collab level's update is a huge improvement, and I think it's a really good piece of horror, but unfortunately, again, it fails to properly scare me. Like, it's a lot scarier, and I think for some people it's effective, but it just doesn't do anything for me. The only level in GD to actually make me feel unnerved isn't even a horror level. It's Save As by Pock. But even then, Save As doesn't make me feel scared, it just makes me feel really, really depressed. It makes me feel bad for elderly people. It makes me really, really wish there was something I could do to help. And that's not horror, that's just depression, which is a completely different negative emotion. The closest I've ever seen GD pull off successful horror is a 2.2 platformer level from the private server called In the Castle. See, this level is basically this RPG style thing where you explore the castle and there's like these Undertale style boss fights, and it's a really, really cool thing, right? There's two ways to end the level, the traditional way and then the Easter egg way, and the Easter egg way is what we care about for this. In the level, there's this little creepy, ominous shadow person, and if you approach him, he says, "Leave this place before midnight." And if you don't, this happens. This is exactly how I hope horror levels function in 2.2. This is amazing. The way it sets up the atmosphere, the way it plays off of your expectations, it's so good. And the actual boss fight feels like something straight out of a Mori. It's done really well, and I can't praise this enough. I personally don't find it that scary, but this is a huge step in the right direction, and I really think this is how we find a good horror level in this game. So I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about Collab level, but what is the thing that ruins almost every GD horror level for me? Aside of how cheesy they can be, and aside of their reliance on gore and jump scares, what is the big thing that ruins them for me? The reliance on exit game imagery. I mean, straight up, this shit is everywhere. It's in Collab level, it's in Mr. Crazy Hands, albeit a little less bad because it's like spooky, scary skeletons. It's still there. It's in Man-Man, it's in Wisteria, it's in Too Kid Friendly. So about 3 hours ago, as of recording this, I decided to record a macro for Too Kid Friendly, and I ended up not being able to because I realized that the level only worked on 60. I decided to take a break and not rebought it yet because, well, I just didn't like the level because of, the exit game stuff. So I decided I would go and try to find a different horror level. So I googled scary Geometry Dash levels, and that ended up taking me to a Reddit thread where people discussed what their scariest Geometry Dash levels were. I ended up being taken to a level called Death's Whisper, and I was like, this level's made in 1.9. This is really cool. This would be an interesting level to showcase it. So I start botting it. Dead body hanging. First thing I see in the level. I'm like, okay, this is clearly just some art that's thrown into the beginning of the level, so whatever, I'll just move on and look past it, because some of the art in this is really cool. There's Death holding a scythe, there's some bats, it looks nice, especially for 1.9. And then, one slide at a time, it kind of pseudo-animates a guy offing himself. And I'm just sitting there like, why is this in every goddamn piece of horror? And it's not just GD levels, it's in the whole goddamn video game industry. I mean, I'm sure you can name several video games right off the bat that just throw a corpse in your face and expect that to be scary. It's really not. I mean, shit, I remember YouTubers were having their videos taken down for playing Mortuary Assistant because, shocker, it had a scene with a body hanging from the goddamn ceiling. No one's ever gonna be scared of a hanging body. That's not effective horror. If someone sees that, they're not gonna be scared. They're either gonna get really distressed, depressed, or not feel anything at all. Unfortunately, this trend has seeped into Geometry Dash horror so much, and it ruins it for me. The second I saw it, I didn't even want to finish botting the level. I just backed out and left a dislike on it, which doesn't really change much on the level because it's in the positive likes, but whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, it pissed me off so much to where I didn't even want to showcase it. And of course, I did it anyway because I'm not just going to not do it. But this is my problem. It is so annoyingly common and I hate it. All I gotta say is that tomorrow will be November, and starting November will be the countdown for 2.2. We don't know exactly what day it is, but some point in the next 30 days, November will bring us 2.2. Unless RobTop delays it for the 7th time. Assuming that doesn't happen, yeah, we're getting 2.2. And if we do, we're gonna have access to a whole suite of new tools to make amazing levels. And I know, considering how good In the Castle was for a 2.2 private server level, we're going to get some amazing horror levels. So just, if you're a creator and you're watching this video, just use this as inspiration. Watch this and get motivated to make a really good horror level, because I know that this community can do it. We haven't reached it yet, but we've gotten pretty close. So that's all I wanted to say. Have a great Halloween.